and we'll get started with this, and we'll get this show on the road. Tonight's class, we're going to cover a couple of sessions, a couple of major sections, a couple of often used sections, and try to get through some things. I sent out. I hope everybody got their copies of the manual that we would be adding to our repertoire this evening. Actually, I'm sorry, this morning. Well, it's this evening for me. It's still confusing. And we're going to look at the client master. We're going to look at the comment master. We're going to look at how worksheets are created, and we're going to look at instrument result edit format. That's why I was kind of hoping Eva was going to be on the call, so we can, because I got a couple questions for her because we're having some issues there. And also just a reminder, there will be no session next week. There'll be a session a week from Monday. I will be unavailable, out of the country actually, for a week, and so we won't have a session next week, but we will have a session on 22nd July, and we can go that. And see who just joined. Have just somebody who logged in as admin. Who is? Can you tell me who this is?
I think admin is from Hong Kong. Eva, yes.
Is it Eva? Eva, okay,
Yeah.
Eva, good. I'm glad. Thank you. Good. I'm glad you're here because I wanted you to. I need to talk to you when we get to one of the sections. Very good. Okay, that's good. Let's see. Anyway, we're gonna. So next week there's no session. There is a session on 4 August. I'm sorry, it would be 5 August for you. Yeah, Tuesday, 5 August, and then so anyway, that's as far as we'll need to go. Today is okay, and we're going to talk about the client master tonight. We're going to talk about, I already said, the client master, the comment master, the work list format maintenance, and instrument result edit and auto release. So we'll start with the client master. The client master is a program that holds all of the things having to do with your customers, with your clients. The doctors that order the tests. It's also a place to store the clinics and the people that maybe are getting the bills. Each client has some characteristics, and they are used when you order the test. They are used when you for lists of things, and they can be done for all kinds of different uses. But primarily, they are the ones that start the process. Each client, if we look at the options for the client master list, client masters, we have some listings. We can do a long list, a short list, by ID, and they're basically just different sort orders of the clients in the list, a long list by client name, or a short list by client name. The short list is just each client has one line that is one line that just shows the client ID, the client name, their phone number, and their extension. That's all that it shows. The long list shows all of the information, or most all of the information by the client, and it can show you each client will come up on a different screen, and so you'll get different names of the clients, their addresses, and so on, and we'll go through all those fields. So let's see. We've got, like I said, a couple of different ways that we can use the clients. One of them is by identifying a clinic that we're going to use, and one of the examples I'm going to show you is this Medicare Family Clinic. Now, each client in the client master has a number of characteristics, and these characteristics identify the client for uses in that things that can be put on the patient report, can be used for database searches, and so on. The client is a name. It has a last name, a first name, a middle initial, and a title. We generally do not use the first name, middle initial, and title, obviously, for the name of a clinic, in this case the Medicare Family Clinic. However, knowing how these names will show up on the report, if you have a long name, you can work out the incorporation of the first name and the last name so that you can get a longer first name. The in care of is just exactly that. It's just another line of 25 characters that can show up on the patient report, and will be placed based on our report characteristics, which is something that we'll get to in our next section. So a lot of this information can show up on the patient report or not, as defined. And we have a note. Okay. So the address line 1, address line 2, a zip code. You have some sort of postal code, I believe, in your country that can be used, and then that postal code gets placed. A contact doesn't usually show up in the on the patient report, but if you go into the client master and you need a contact person, you can record somebody that if you ever need to call them, you can call them. Now, the phone number is an interesting thing, and we have been working, or I have been working with development, trying to get them to modify the phone number field so that it's compatible with non-U.S. phone number configurations. In the U.S., the phone number consists of a 3-digit area code, a 3-digit prefix, and a 4-digit number. And also, we can accommodate a 4-digit extension. So if you look on your reports, and sometimes if you look in the in your listing, you'll see that the system automatically takes the 3-digit area code and puts parentheses around it, because that's the way it's handled in our notation. Then it takes the 3-digit prefix and separates that from the 4-digit number with a dash. And then the extension is the last 4 digits of the numbers. So you can play with the telephone number in order for it to work by simply knowing how those phone numbers work. So if the country code, or if you put a space in front of that first number, then it would be 65 in the parenthesis, and then it would have 698, and then it would put a dash between the 8 and the 1, and so on. So it's one of the things that I'm not real happy about, but it's just the way the system works, and we figure out a way to make that work for us. and we can do that. Of course, if you have any kinds of questions, you can let me know. The client type has relatively little use at this point. Right now, in what we're going to see a little bit later today is the client type can be used in auto release. So when we're talking about results coming across an instrument interface, and we want certain clients' results to be edited or released or handled differently than other clients, we can indicate a particular client type, and that's what this client type field is used for. There's nothing in databases. There's nothing in that you have to define. You just, everybody with the same client type would be acted on in the same fashion. So that's the first general field for the client master. Yeah, Paula, you're right. If there's a lot of background noise, so if somebody has not muted themselves, please mute your microphone until you have a question. I'm going to try and identify which one is not. So I think it was Eva. So if you can't mute, then I muted for you. Eva communicates with, well, if you just let me know via text, I'll try to keep an eye on the screen, and then if you have a question. So Paula, that looks like the background is better. Okay, good. All right, so the second tab has to do with order options. Now the order options have to do with how orders for this client are handled. There are a couple of different things that are handled that we can do with this client in terms of ordering. The very first one, it says auto ordered test. And if we put a test code in here, say an HK6, or we put in some sort of a panel, the way that works is that when this doctor comes in, and when you put this doctor in as when you put this doctor in as the ordering doctor, this test is automatically ordered. Now it doesn't have a whole lot of use. It would have a use if you had, for example, a client that had that every time the only thing they ever ordered was one test. So you could come in here, and when you're doing your order entry process, you could just put the doctor in and basically say OK, because that test would automatically be ordered. So that's one of the purposes for that. It's one of the very old features of CyberLab, and just has kind of hang out. Now, the exempt client specialty code has to do with something that I do know, I'm pretty certain you guys don't use, but we have a program called Order Entry Decision Support, and it has to do with handling certain tests that certain insurance companies require that certain tests be sent to a reference lab, and so the laboratory is not allowed to perform the test even if they have the capability. This code allows us to exempt this client from that, so that the lab would be allowed to do that. I don't want to get into it too much because I don't think you have a use for it. The site code links the doctor, or links this client to a particular site. So if you double click on this field, you'll see all the sites. The only purpose that this has, and I don't believe it's used anymore, but it has to do with faxing of results. If a client is, some of our clients live outside of zones, and they wanted to avoid long distance charges, so they would set up a modem at a particular site. They would link the client to that modem by this field, and then they would use the modem without having long distance long distance charges. The rest of the fields that are on this form have to do with a requisition that can be created by CyberLab. CyberLab has a program to create a requisition. I don't believe you guys have a use for that because you have a lot of standard requisitions. But we have the capability, and back in the early days they didn't have a whole lot of requisitions, and so we were able to make them, and each requisition could be customized by each client. You can put in some a note in the special handling text. You can put tests down here by just adding the tests that you wanted on there, and this would list these tests with a little box next to them so that they could check the boxes. There are a number of other situations that can be put onto these forms. It's something that we do in the background, but it is a requisition. The program that creates the requisitions can print 50 or 100 at a time, and then the couriers take the requisitions out. So they can be, the requisitions can be customized, limited, have a limited customization for each client. So if you have a client that specializes in a certain medical field, then the tests associated with that medical field could be on there and easy for him to find, and you wouldn't have to have every single test on each requisition. So that's what it is. In addition, recently we have added multiple requisitions, so each client can have 5 different requisitions to be selected from 20 up to, I think there's 25 different requisition formats, and then that just basically puts it has access to the same information, but it puts it in different places on the form and sometimes puts some information and some information not. So it basically show that to you because it is something that if you ever think that you would like to create a custom requisition, we would be able to help you with that. The next tab has to do with result options, and this is a little bit different. The result options have to do with how can we treat this client a little differently based relative to the results that are printed. We have a call report situation where if we want to call results and we use the call reporting system, we can designate that this client can have his stat samples on this call report. And that means that if this client ordered a stat sample, regardless of the results, it would show up on the call report and indicate to the person using the call reporting system that this physician's, the results for this particular physician would need to be called. The inquiry group. Now, we have a system in CyberLab that can limit access of certain users to certain clients. So that in user class maintenance, you can create a user, you can say that this user can only access the results of client number 23222. So if this user was, say, the client's office and they were coming in on the gateway or they were looking at the results online, they would only be able to see their clients or their patients' results. In addition, if it, like the case of this particular client, you know, there's 4 or 5 different physicians, they can be assigned to a client group or an inquiry group. The inquiry group is fairly arbitrary. You can designate it. So if you wanted to call it, say, Medicare, because that's the name of this group, then you would assign Medicare as the inquiry group to all the physicians that are in this group, so that when they go into inquiry, they would only see the results of their patients or their group's patients as you have set them up. So that's how that works. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about user class maintenance, which is not the next session, but the session after. Normal cytology letter is no use. It has to do with automatically generating a letter for a normal pap smear. And while you do pap smears in Singapore, you're not using CyberLab's Bethesda cytology system. The route assigns this client to a particular route, and the routes are set up in a couple of places. They are courier routes, and so that when we used to be able to print reports by the courier route, we can also do some other things with the routing. There's some new features about routes and assigning to different people, so that may be of interest at some point. The interim report set and the cumulative report set and the microcumulative report set have to do with the report parameters. And in each report parameter set, there can be many, and there are many on your system. They are the way that the information on the patient report is organized. And it can be set up to cover a number of different options, different pieces of demographic information, different organization of the test results on the form, a whole lot of different things. Again, we're going to get into that in big detail on next class on August 5, and we'll see that. When these fields are blank, and so each interim report is the sample report. The cumulative report is a cumulative report of multiple samples for the same patient. And the microcumulative report is if you were doing microbiology, you could get a separate cumulative report of microbiology results. Everyone would get the default set, and when we create a report parameter set, we create a default set which is applied to everyone who does not have a custom set. So as long as these fields are blank, this client would use the default report parameter set. If they are to get a report that looks different, then they would get the custom set, and you would see a 3-character code in here. The copies field is something that works to put in multiple copies of a report. It does not work the same since we've switched to a different reporting mechanism. So if it's not working, then we should talk about how you want to create multiple copies, because the interim report rules now takes care of the copies that are involved. So you don't have to worry about putting multiple copies in here. It used to be that if you wanted 2 copies of the report every time for a particular physician, you would put a 1 in here, because that would indicate 1 additional copy. But with interim report rules, it doesn't work. That field is not active. RRG custom panel. RRG, of course, is the result response generator, and if a client has some custom rules that are in place that only apply to that client, then, as you recall from last week, when we create a custom result response panel, then we would put that panel into this field, and then those rules would apply to this client. And of course, if the custom panel is appended to the general panel, they would get all the rest of the rules as well. Auto-transmit. Auto-transmit basically means fax. And there is also going to be some information that we will see once the email is configured, because that's another thing that's going to be happening. As a matter of fact, it's all done here in this tab. Auto-transmit, if this yes or no, this determines that that this client is an auto-dial client or a fax client, and that means all of his reports are going to be auto-transmitted. The multiple fax options is a normal fax option, a cover page per report, or 1 report per connection. We have a couple of clients that normally what happens is that if we have a batch of samples that are scheduled to go to the same phone number, they all go at the same time, and there's just one cover sheet for that report. So if they wanted to, what this client wanted was that we would send a report, hang up, dial them up again, and send another report, each one having their own cover sheet. So that's what these options are here for. Now you don't doing any, as far as I know, you're not doing any faxing yet, but there was an interest expressed in doing some faxing. That's going to require, if you ever are interested in faxing, it's going to require some additional hardware and some configuration to take place. But the auto faxing will go through this fairly quickly. The auto faxing takes place if you have a batch frequency of 0 and a number of batch samples per batch of 0. It would go automatically whenever the sample was ready to go. You could set the batch frequency to every hour, or you could set the batch samples per batch to 10, which means that every hour it would send the results, or it would send, as soon as it got 10 samples to send, it would send them all at once, which is exact opposite of some of those options that we saw up above about one fax per collection. I'm not going to go into it, but the time slot boxes down here just kind of identify the times that that you would fax to a particular number. You may fax to one number at some time of the day and another number at another time of day, and so on and so forth. For now, because we're in interim report rules, this is basically all that you need to worry about. You would put in a fax phone number, you would put in the auto transmit of yes, and you would be able to move on from there. And that's all you need. We used to be able to manage our own faxing, and in which case we had, if you look at adding a time slot, you'll see some other information about what's going to be there. So we'd put the phone number in, and we put the other information. Add an email slot, and in this, just so that you're aware, we can send emails to your clients. We have a couple of options. We can send the report in an email as an attachment. So we create a PDF copy of the report, and it goes to your client as an attachment. We can have notification only, which means we can send an email that says, "Hey doc, you've got some results," and then he can connect and get in and look at the results. Notification with interface. If we have an interface with your client so that Aspira sends the results, we can send him an email that says, "Hey, we've sent you some results." No notification with interface. Not sure exactly what that does, because notification, why would you bother? But I think there's an option there. Notification criticals only. So, and this is all done by each client. So if this client only wanted to get an email if there were critical values on there, then you would select that attachment. There are a number of other things related to emails that are involved in getting things set up, and we can go through a little bit of that in a second. Matter of fact, if we look at our client, that's not what I wanted to do. The email body setup, we have several options on that. So when you send an email, you can create and design the email signature text. You can design the email body attachment, and the body attachment can be different if the results are final, or if they're preliminary, or if it's a notification of final results, or if a notification of preliminary. Any different circumstance that that you can think of, you could have a different body. And the body of the report, basically, if we look at what it is, it's just a box that says that you type in what you want into the body of the report. You also have the ability to add some variables to the body of the report. So if, for example, your body of the report was, "Dear Doctor," attached are the results for your patient, and then if you put in if you put this in here, ampersand PATNME, then it would insert the patient's name in that area. And then your thing would continue for sample ID, ampersand sample ID, and so on and so forth. Then you can create a body of a report that looks like it was customized for that patient, and it gives the doctor information about what's there. The last tab on the Client Master is called the More Options tab. You may see different things on your More Options tab. We'll go over the More Options tab. The More Option tabs were initially used in CyberLab's billing package. We used to have a billing package that was directly connected and fed into CyberLab, our CyberLab billing from CyberLab LIS, and it would carry information about the client, and that's what these fields are. If you look at your manual, the manual page, we're in Manual 8C, page 10, there's a picture of the other options, or the More Options tab, with all of the fields open. Now, since we no longer have a billing system, we have made these fields available for our clients to store information about each of the doctors or the clients. So some of these things have specific uses, and some of them have basically just generic, that you can design whatever you want to. And your manual tells you what each of the fields are, what are they, whether they're alpha or numeric, how many characters there are. So you can store information about your clients so that you may use it in an SQL report, or you may simply go into the Client Master and look up a client and say, "Oh, I need to know what this guy's, I don't know, whatever information." I have a hard time thinking of it because we've covered most of the information in the rest of the program. So the only field that you have on is the fax number, and that fax number this fax number field shows up in inquiry if you are going to fax. Now, since you don't have an autofax, it probably wouldn't work that way, but this gives you a place to store that. Maybe you have some other phone numbers. Maybe the doctor has a cell phone number that's different than the office phone number, or maybe you want to store an email. Just even if you're not emailing, you may want to know what the doctor's email is. We can open up these other fields and we can relabel them so that you can use those fields as part of your client database. Now, a word of caution: this is global. So if you have something that is going to be just unique to your particular site or your particular branch, that probably would be okay as long as it wasn't conflicting with somebody else's. So you would want to coordinate that. And right now you have all of these fields that are available to you, with the exception of the fax number field. So that's pretty much the Client Master. There is another section you're going to see in your manual about client courier routes, and you can also, in this field, you can define a courier route and insert the clients to be in those routes, and just basically define that. So if I was to define a courier route 01, then I would list all of the clients that were going to be in route code 01, and you could give it a description like upper east side or down the river or something like that. And that way you can group all your clients, if nothing else, than just to create a list of clients in a particular area. Now, I don't know how all your couriers work, but it's possible to create routes, and we've done some pretty neat stuff with this and with some other programs that we've created for creating couriers, so that you can look at those in that fashion. In your manual, you're also going to see a couple pages about the Client Master mileage feature. CyberLab has a feature that will assign the mileage, how far it is to go to a client and come back again. The reason for that is that some of our clients get reimbursed from the government or from insurance companies based on how many miles they have to go to pick up the sample or to pick up the samples to bring back to the laboratory. So they have to record the mileage, and so if it's 25 miles to a particular client, then the system automatically says, okay, there's a sample from this client, we're going to get 25 miles for this sample. It also does some other fancy stuff, like if you get 10 samples from this client and we drove 25 there and 25 back, that's 50. We're only going to pay 5 miles per sample because there's 10 samples. So it's pretty slick there. Okay, I want to open it up for questions just to see if everybody's still awake. Anybody have any questions about the Client Master? Is anybody out there? Nobody? Oh,
Yeah, here.
Okay. Okay, good. I was getting worried. So are there any questions about the Client Master? Now, keep in mind too, you may have some questions that come up later or that you can't quite you can't formulate, but feel free always to send to me an email with any questions you have about anything at all that we've covered. So the next place we want to talk about is the Comment Master. Now, any of you who've been around CyberLab for more than 5 years or so are going to remember this as the Message Master. But the Comment Master is a program that we can identify up to 999 different canned comments. Now, you'll notice in this Comment Master maintenance there are things that reference DRG maintenance and DRG list. DRGs are diagnostic related groups, and the government in the United States had this wild idea to help complicate the reimbursement for medical care by creating this monster definition of diagnostic related groups. And they would say, okay, if your appendix, if you take your appendix out, that's diagnostic group A. And so for anything that is diagnostic group A, we're going to pay X amount of dollars no matter what. So every single patient's diagnosis was part of a diagnostic related group, and so that if you ordered a test on the thyroid when you were taking somebody's appendix out, they would say, well, we don't have to pay for that. So for your purposes, don't worry about the DRG maintenance, the DRG list. You'll have the comment maintenance, the Comment Master list, and the Comment Master changes log. The changes log just identifies any changes that are made to a comment. Now, one of the things to know about comments is that the contents of the comment are put into CyberLab in at least 2 different ways. One way is that it just takes the text of a comment and stores it with the sample. This is the easiest thing to do because it doesn't change what happens. So whatever the Comment master, or whatever the comment says at the time you put it into the result, is what it's going to say on that sample if you bring it up again next week or next month. In some cases, the comments are part of the result. So say comment number 145 means negative hepatitis antibody screening. And if that comment is used as a result, then what happens is that that comment code is what is stored as the result. And so if you change the comment down the road and you go back and look at another sample that used that comment, then it would now say what the comment says today. So you have to be real careful about making changes to anything that's in the comment master, just to make sure to determine how is it used, and if you're going to make changes, if you're not changing the general concept of what the comment says, then you should be okay to change it. But you have to just be aware that there are multiple instances of the comments. A couple of other things to know about the comments is that in the old days, our comments were 12 lines, up to 12 lines of up to 50 characters each line. Well, that's kind of changed a little bit. Let me see if I can find a good one. That's kind of changed a little bit. Depending upon how it's used, it could be depending upon how it's used, it could be you could have multiple lines. So if you use a comment as a text comment, you can have more than the 12 lines, and it could technically get over the 60 lines. So you have to be real careful when you create comments or if you modify comments. This particular comment number 554, says suggest repeat later if clinical indicated. And that's basically the comment. I'm going to see if I can find something here that's a little longer. Well, I don't know. I think I got real busy and didn't get a chance to get any research done. But you can put in, and if you see something that's kind of a mistake, you can fix it. It looks like it's doing spell check. I didn't know it did that. Interesting. Each comment has a couple of different characteristics to it. Again, the text of the comment just shows up here. One of the things you need to know is that you cannot have any blank lines. So if you need to put in a space, you need to put in something, even if it's just a dash or an asterisk or something in that line, and then you can go ahead and do that. If you want to get fancy, you can come over and put in, say, a couple of lines to separate one thought from another and type in the line. So there are no blank lines. Depending again on how the result is used, you may need to be careful. The system will let you type beyond the end of the line. The old system would stop you at 50 characters. This one will let you type. It'll wrap around, but it will not. It'll keep on going on the report. So anytime that you make a new comment, anytime that you modify a comment where you've changed some of the line lengths, you want to be sure and use that comment in the place where it will be used, and make sure that you're able to see the entire comment and that all the information shows up on the report in the fashion that you want. Internal use only. The options are, there's a couple of options on here that are hardly ever used, but they are there if they should be needed. Internal use only. This means that in certain cases, if you say yes to internal use only, it will not show up on the patient report. But this is not true of all comment of the comment uses. It would only be true in those cases where you were using it as the comment code itself. For example, let me see if I can get a quick example. One of the places is in urinalysis results entry. Let me see if I can pull one up. Ah, good. If you look down here in the remarks section, you can see comment codes in here that are they are all in 800 level comment codes. So if I put in a comment code, you'll notice that only the last 2 digits show up of that comment, because in this situation, the comment codes are all 800 level comment codes. So if you had an 800 level comment code, and if it was marked as internal use only, you would be able to see it here, but it would not show up on the patient report. So it's hard to imagine how that might work, but that's what the internal use only does. Now, if you go into another program like single results entry, let's use the urinalysis one. If I was to go in here in this text field and I added a comment 845, if it's there. Oops, I guess it's, oops. Now, these special comments that we'll talk about can be used anywhere else. If I used 891 and I put it in here in this text area, then even if it was flagged as internal use only, it would still print, because this is a case where the comment code is not stored. It's this text that gets stored. I hope that's clear. I know it can get confusing, but if it's here, then it's going to not be treated. But this one is storing the 99 or the 899. Sample comments print on the last page of the report. Let's get rid of this. I'm in the test environment in case anybody's getting nervous about what I'm doing. Sample comment prints on the last page of the report. This means that whatever is in this report will print on the last page of a sample report, and it will print by itself as a completely separate page. It had a use that the doctor could tear it off and fill out something and send it back to the lab if they wanted to. Now, again, if you were to say sample prints on the last page of the report, even if you did sample print on the last page of the report, it would only do so if you put that comment in one field in order entry. So if I was to put into, well, you can see the field here. You see this field where it says comment code? If you put a comment code in here that is marked yes, sample comment prints on the last page of the report, then it would print on the last page of the report. Anywhere else, it's going to print like it was any other comment. Okay? You really shouldn't have any of these marked yes. It doesn't really matter, but if you ever used it, it would print on the last page of the report. Indicate if test could not be resulted. Again, whatever this message is, maybe it's specimen broken in the laboratory. It means that the test couldn't be done, and it's the only time is if we went into result entry and we entered the comment code 588 as the result, then it would go to a special report that we have in our is it workflow? Yeah. This report here, tests unable to run. This report is all flagged on, is all based on that particular comment being used as a result of a test. And so this is a management tool where supervisors can go through and print this out and look at it, if it's even being used at all. Now, we talked a little bit about 800 level test codes being used for the urinalysis. Again, 800 level test codes can be used anywhere you want them. It's just that in urinalysis, those remark codes areas that I showed you are only going to show you 800 level codes. So that you want to keep that in mind. Now, another set of codes are the 700 level codes. The 700 level codes have a similar use in manual differential. And you have them set up here basically because when I did the initial training at PathLab Singapore, I channeled all of the manual differential comment codes into this point. Well, you're not using CyberLab's manual differential. As I understand it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but your manual, when you do a manual differential, you simply change the results of the auto differential to match that, and you don't do a separate, how should I say, a separate test for the manual differential. So those are the things. The only other test code that has any special significance, and if you remember, if I was a really hardcore teacher, I would ask you what's the special significance of message code number 15, and somebody would get a prize if they could remember what it was, because we talked about it 2 sessions in the first session. Message code number 15. Again, message code 15 can be used anywhere in the system at any time, but message code 15 is the message that is attached to a send-out test that is labeled Y, or that is designated as Y or Z. So send-out code Y or send-out code Z will be resulted with this message code. Now, if you notice the body of this message is just a dash. So whenever and I think you do have some Y and Z send out codes. If you look at the results, and this happens as soon as the test is ordered. So as soon as the test is ordered, that test is resulted, so that it doesn't ever show up on any pending work. And if you remember again what we talked about, the message codes Y will show up on a worksheet that indicates that you have a list of them done. Okay. All right. That's any questions about the Comment Master? Seems like it's a fairly simple program, but there's a lot of little things going on in there. So if anybody has any questions or comments about the Comment Master? Okay, we're going to move on. The next section we're going to talk about is the work list, or worksheet as I like to call it, format maintenance. This is going to be in your manual section that I just sent out on the last time, 8E. and it's going to be on page 2. Now, this is where the formatting is done for quite a number of different we call them worksheets, we call them load lists, or I'm sorry, we call them worksheets or work lists. But we also, anything that we're going to design, because there's a couple of things on the bottom of this list that you're going to wonder, what is all that? Well, when they updated the system a few years ago, they decided to put all of the things that we're going to format in one place. So each of these things will have a different formatting. We'll talk about test specific in a minute, but we have single worksheets, so things like sed rates, things like monospots, and things like other single tests that you're going to print a worksheet that you're going to go over to the workbench and you're going to print out. You can set up what demographic information you want to see on that worksheet. The matrix worksheet parameters. This is for the matrix worksheet. Now, I don't know that you're still using any matrix worksheets. I think when we were out there we looked at those, and I'm not certain. Load list parameters, if you print out a load list, which is not done very often, not done much at all, it can have a different configuration than the single worksheet. The pending work report parameters, the send out worksheet parameters, the global order entry form. We talked a little bit about that when we were talking about test types. That is designed here as well. If you were in a hospital or in a clinic or in a nursing home situation where you were going out and collecting specimens, you can design a collection list. All of these worksheet type and collection list things are all formatted, and so is the turnaround report parameters. They're all formatted in the same way. We select the demographic item that we want to see on the worksheet. We tell it what line and column we want to see that demographic piece of information show up, and we can also put a label on it, and I'll go through that. But all of these are done in the same fashion. The turnaround report parameters, this is something that's a little unusual, but it also allows you to define a report for a turnaround time report. And I'll show you that one as well. The one that's not in the same fan as the rest of them is the work days for turnaround time report. In some laboratories that are only, let's say, work Monday through Friday and they don't ever work on holidays, you can designate Saturday and Sunday, for example, and the holidays as being days not to count in the turnaround time. So that's something, that's what that last one is. So let's take a look at the, wait a minute, let me go in order of the manual. That might make it easier for everybody. Yeah. So the first thing that the manual talks about is the single worksheet parameters. So the single worksheet parameter shows what you want to see. Now, if you have, if you want to pop your pages open to page 10 of this, just kind of set them aside. There are some examples of the worksheets, and I'll tell you basically what we're looking at. If you'll notice that, and it's not the same as what you see on your thing, but those between the two dotted lines is what we call the header of the worksheet. And there are two lines there. And the first line is what you put in this field, in the top field, that line, and the second line would be what you put in the bottom field. The numbers at the top of the screen have to do with column, and that'll become clear here in a few minutes as far as what it is. On your example on page, is it page 10? On your example on page 10, we see that the sample, result, PID, patient name, age, and sex on the first line, client name, microsource on the second line. So that gives you the header. The top of the worksheet format is is hard-coded. It'll put the lab name, the date, time, the test, the department, the work list page number, the male and female normal ranges, the non-gender normal ranges, and so on. But what we get to format is right here. Now we can designate the number of samples per page, which you can put, 99 or 60 just means it'll put as many on there as it can. Or you can put a 1 in there, so maybe you want a worksheet for each sample. Anything more or less than that is going to be, or more than that is going to be looked like it, because it'll list out if you have 3 per page, it'll put the first 3, and then it'll kick out a next page and put 3 more, and so on. You can designate the number of blank lines between samples. This means that that way you don't have to crowd them any more than you have to, or you can crowd them as much as you want. So maybe you want to have as many samples on a page as you can get. If you're doing microbiology, you can have a microbiology worksheet that's different than the rest of them. You can say print all sample types, which that means is if you said no to that, you would have to designate, it would ask you for what sample types, like maybe you only wanted to see the stats. Include the century in the dates. We only have 80 columns up here, and if we didn't want to see 2014 and we needed those 2 characters for something else in our line, then we could just say, I don't want the century in the dates, and so it's going to say, it's going to give you the date without the 2014. It'll just say 14. You know that when you print a worksheet, you can print the worksheet by department. Excuse me. And so if you print it by department, it's going to do a page break between the tests or not. So what it's asking you is because when you do by department, it's going to print all of it. So let's say that monospot and rheumatoid factor and SED rate, we're all in the same department. And if you don't have a page break between the tests, it's going to put all the monospots, and then it'll put the SED rates, and then it'll put the rheumatoid factors, and they won't do any page checks until it runs out of room. If you say yes to eliminate the page, or if you say no, that means it's going to print all the monospots, it'll do a page eject, it'll print all the SED rates, it'll do a page eject, and it'll do all the rheumatoid factors in a list. So that's what the page break. And then it'll also suppress the normal ranges, because when it does the page break, it's not going to have any, the normal ranges that you'll notice that prints at the top of the page, they're not going to be there because you've got multiple tests on the same page. So once we get the header straightened out and some of the basic configurations, we just go through the list of all of the demographic pieces of information that we want. We tell it what line we want it on and what column we want the name. So in this case, the patient name starts in column 1, or line 1, column 12. The sample ID is in line 1, column 1. The collection date and time in line 1, column 67. And so if you look, each different type of worksheet will have different data available to print on the worksheet. Not every worksheet has all the same information. So if you look at all of the things that's available, you can tell what information you can have on your worksheet. And it can be a simple worksheet like the one that's on page 10, where it just shows what this information is, or it can be a more complex worksheet with much more information. One of the things that you keep in mind is that single worksheets, these are for tests that have a worksheet that you print out, and this is global. So if you all use the same test code for SED rate, then the worksheet that you design for your SED rates is going to be available to everyone that's in PathLab Singapore. So all of the branches would have the same worksheet. So single worksheet format is going to be the same for all single worksheets. That's going to be the same for the pending work report. If you format the pending work report different, it's going to be a system-wide format. So this information. So, and it's obviously, it probably doesn't cause a whole lot of problems, but if it starts, if somebody wants to put something on there, then I would suggest that you contact Mr. Kwa or send out a blanket invite to everybody in the system to see if that's going to be a problem for them. Now, the test-specific format allows you to add additional information to a particular worksheet. And there are two different sections in this format. And if you look on page 11 of the manual, you would be able to see the test-specific what's called a formatted work list. The instruction that I'm going to talk to you about starts on page 7, but the example is on page 11. So you'll look and see what the worksheet does. And so if I put in a test code, I'll just use one for. There are two things here. There's a QC line and there's a result line. If you look at the example, the QC line, and I made the box, so you have to put the asterisks in and do all the dirty work that I did to make the box. This line prints at the top of each worksheet. The reason it's called a QC line is because it was used to where you could write in the results of the QC on your report, so that if you had record your positive and negative, and you needed to record lot numbers and whatever, and then you kept the worksheets forever, you could use this box on the worksheet to record the results. Some places RPRs recorded the number of drops in that the dropper dropped, and some places record the temperature and the humidity and the number of rotations that you rocked the card on, so on and so forth. So you would set this up with blank lines and everything else on here. So you would define the QC line, and the way you would define that is by simply coming in here and typing in what you want to see at the top of the worksheet for this particular test. So you would just type that in there, and then when that tests worksheet, in addition to the information that we would see on from the demographic information that we just defined, we would also see this. The business for the result line, this is exactly the same way, formatted exactly the same way, except that the information that you put in here shows up underneath each test. Now you'll notice that somebody decided to put in, I think it looks like a set of underlines, to separate each of the tests with an underline, and that's on the SedRate worksheet. So if you print a SedRate worksheet, underneath between each patient that's listed, you're going to see that set of underlines. On the example on page 11, you can see how that works. Each test, each sample has the result line, and the result line, I just put in a bunch of data in here to say that, and you can enter result A and result B and result C, and then the final result interpretation, so that you've recorded all of the components that you need to get to the interpretation of the result. Then you just go to the computer and manually enter the result. Now this obviously only applies to manual results, but this is how the worksheets are formatted. Now, in your manual section, there's a section in there on matrix worklist setup, which basically, if you were using matrix worklist, and a matrix worksheet just allows you to enter multiple test results for multiple samples in a random fashion at a time. I'll just show this to you real quick. in case that appeals to anybody. And actually, there is one matrix worksheet that looks like it's getting used, and that's for a 2-hour postprandial and a 3-hour postprandial. What this does is allow you to go in and select matrix worksheet when you do results entry. The results entry screen for matrix is panel and matrix, and then if you select matrix, now there's only one matrix worksheet, so you don't get a chance to select it, but you could select multiples if there was more than one, and then you would just basically, there may not be any, but on this page you would see a list of all the samples, and then you would just go through and enter the results for each of those 2 tests all the way down. Maybe one of them had a 2-hour, one of them had a 3-hour, and so on. Maybe one of them had both, but that's how they would be organized. Very much like a spreadsheet entry for results. So, okay, questions about work list format maintenance. So everybody's an expert at work list format maintenance. You know, if I was really a mean teacher, I would probably make assignments for everybody to go out and create some worksheets in the test environment just to see that they can do that. But since I have such a wonderful group of students, I know that they're going to go out and do that on their own, and I don't even have to make an assignment. Okay, the last section we're going to cover is instrument results edit format. We're not going to talk about editing instrument results in the results entry thing. We're going to talk about how this screen gets...
Mr. Pat, sorry.
Yes, please.
I think there's a question from Eunice.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Yes, please ask a question, Eunice. You can talk. I don't know if you have your phone maybe, but go ahead. Thank you for paying attention, whoever that was that reminded me. History results are not currently available for a worksheet. Oh, good. That's okay. But if you wanted, when you go into results entry to enter the results, you should be seeing previous results right now. But we don't have those available on the worksheet as yet. But that's a good idea. It's a good question. In fact, I'm going to add that to my list of things that would be nice to have on the worksheet. Yeah, I understand that. That makes sense to put it on an ABO work list, because if you come up with somebody that's B positive and they used to be A positive, you'd probably want to know that. You probably have some questions about whether you got the right person or not. Very good. Yeah, I will submit that to the product management, and maybe they'll make some changes. Any other questions? Okay. The last section we're going to cover today is instrument result edit format, and we're going to go a little bit of review of auto release. Auto release is a really new kind of a thing that it's been available for a little while, but we've expanded it and made it a little bit easier. So in 8E, the manual section 8E, page 13 is where we're going to start. Because there's a number of things that you can do with the instrument results edit format. As you know, that each instrument that is interfaced, and make that clear, each instrument that's interfaced can have multiple groups, and you in your central link at headquarters you have A, B, C, and 1. And each of those groups has different tests. They're all in the same instrument. They are in 8888 is the load list code for Central Link 1, but they are different group codes. And what this is for is to facilitate the editing of the results, so that if you put a lot of your esoteric tests, say, on 8888C, you don't have to go in there as often because you're not running that many of those tests, and you can get rid of them. You can get them through the editor much quicker. So let's take a look at how these things are configured. Let's take a look at 88. We'll look at this one here because I want to get some information to Miss Eva about this, and hopefully because we want to make sure we can understand that. Now, if you look at this screen, there's a lot of interesting pieces of information on this screen that pertain to the instrument results edit screen. A couple of things you don't have to worry about. Sample or tray cup. We have, to my knowledge, no more tray cup instruments, interfaces in CyberLab or in Aspira. A tray cup was one of those instruments back in the old days where before we had barcoding and before we had positive sample identification, we had to literally create ourselves a load list by assigning a sample ID to a particular tray on the instrument and a particular cup position on the instrument. Because all the instrument would do would run a test, and it would send back the results and said, these are the results of the sample that was sitting in tray number 1, cup 13. And so if we didn't link those to a sample ID, we'd have some problems. So just remember that was always going to be sample, and don't ever change it. Edit by address. If you have multiple instruments that are working on the same interface and the same load list code, you have the ability to edit by instrument address. So let's say that you have 2 dimensions in there and they're connected to the same interface. Well, the results are going to come in one instrument or the other instrument, and each of those instruments would have an address. You could normally, when you say no to that, that means you're going to enter all the results regardless of which instrument that it came from, and that's what you're saying here. If you're not collating all the results and you have different operators that are processing data from different machines, then you may want to edit by instrument address. Suppress the instrument flag display. The instrument can send out some flags on occasion. It'll say, that it had an error or it detected a clot or some kind of a weird thing. What the instrument sends to us is a 1 or 2 character code. It doesn't ever send us what it means, but it does send us the code. So when you go into instrument results editing, you will see an instrument code. Could be a 1 or a 2, or it could be an X or a Z, or it could be whatever the instrument sends us. But basically all it does is alert you that there was an instrument code, and then you can check it out on the instrument itself. And if you say no, that's a double negative. So don't suppress means let it display. I never understand programmers sometimes. And so that means that the instrument flags will display, so you will see them. Edit stat samples first. This means that any sample that's designated as stat during order entry is going to be, and there's a group of results. When you go into the editor and you pull up a group of results, they are going to be edited first. They're going to be at the top of the list of the group that you bring in from the edit pool, so that you would edit through them first if you say yes to that. Show 2-character instrument code. Sometimes instruments will send 2 characters, sometimes they just send 1. If you want to not see only 1 code instead of 2, you would say actually you said no here, so if they did send two, we would only show the first one if you said yes to the first problem like there. Hold results for repeated tests. So if you go in and repeat a test, then you're going to hold those results. Those results will actually go to the held if you said yes to that, and then you'd process the held. I'm going to save the auto release data here until we get done with everything else. Overlay. Overlay allows the results from an instrument, and this, Eva, if you're hopefully you're listening, this is where the switch that that Lawrence has been telling about. The VersaCell, for example, has a tendency to send over results before a sample is completed. So when you get into the editor, you might see several edit displays or edit windows for the same sample ID. And so unless you can find a setting on the instrument, on the VersaCell or on any of the instruments that says don't send anything to the LIS until everything for that sample is done, then you can say overlay yes, and it will collate all the results that it gets, so that when you open up the editor, all the tests for one sample will show up in the same window. And ignore the thing about tray cup. Ignore the test group class. If you recall, when we talked about the test dictionary, we had the ability to assign a class for test groups as terms of grouping tests by who could have access to them and who could not. Edit by instrument run order. If you look real close, when you look at the results that come off of the instrument, you're going to see that these are in sample number order. Now that means that if notwithstanding the stats, you're going to see all the stats first, and then if you have more than one stat, they're going to be in sample number order. Everything is going to be in sample number order, because when you pull it up out of the edit pool, the programs reset it, resort them to sample number order. If you say yes to edit by instrument run order, then they're going to be sorted in the order that the instrument sent them to CyberLab. So if regardless of what the sample ID number is, they're going to be ordered. It's going to come out in order of the way the instrument ran them. Now the last three that I want to talk about have to do with auto release, and I'll talk about auto release. There's two completely different ways for auto release to happen. The auto release that gets set up here on this screen is very simple. You can hold from release any abnormal result or only critical results. You have to say yes to auto release here, and then you can put in a tech ID or create a tech ID for auto release, because remember, when you go into the inquiry and look up a test result, it tells you the test that was associated with it. Usually there is a tech ID called AR that is the auto release tech ID, and apparently it hasn't been defined yet. But anyway, it's similar to calculated test or whatever, so you do that. That is what gets assigned to the result. And the way that works is when you go into the editing, you're going to get a new prompt that's going to say, okay, release all the normals or whatever. And so then you will have to initiate it, and it will release everything that hasn't been designated to be edited. And so if it's any abnormal, that means just high, lows, very highs, or very lows. But if you just say criticals, then the only ones that would get held would be the critical results. So that's one form of auto release. The other form of auto release is a rules-based system. Now, before I get to the rules-based system, I want to finish up this screen because this screen is also very important. The order that the tests appear in this list is the order that the tests are going to appear in the edit screen. Now, when we first set these things up, we try to ask you, or whoever we're working with in terms of the instrument, what order do you want to see the tests on the screen? Now, if you want, it's very difficult to change this drastically because you don't have any way to insert and move, or you could, if you wanted to put total cholesterol on the bottom, you could delete. You just bring to total cholesterol. Get out of there. You could delete total cholesterol and delete it, and then add it back to the bottom. If you really wanted to restructure the order of the tests, it would be advisable to you could go in and delete all the tests and re-add them to the edit group in the order that you wanted to see them. It would be that wouldn't be that difficult. It would be a little tedious, and you would certainly want to write everything down before you did, because once you deleted it, you'd have to remember all the test numbers to add them back. A couple of things with this is the test code. It'll show you the abbreviation and the test name. And the precision. This is an interesting thing. Why would they ask you for the precision? Well, sometimes an instrument will send a test to you in more precision than you normally report. So if in the case of triglycerides, which would be kind of silly, let me see. Let's look at total bilirubin. Total bilirubin, it defaults to the precision that you report. But if the instrument sends 2 decimals and you wanted to see 2 decimal precision on the screen, it would still only report 1 decimal. But if you wanted to see 2 decimals on the screen, you would be able to change the precision that you would display that. So that's basically what this particular edit screen does, and that is group specific. So 9970A can be different than 9970B and C, and so on and so forth. Now, the auto-release rules are a more complicated or complex way to release samples. A couple of things to keep in mind. Once we set up rules, and again, the rules are assigned to a particular edit group. So there's 2 things that have to be done. First, we're going to assign some rules to a particular instrument code. Let's, for example, say this one. No, I'm going to do it. I lied. I'm going to do this different. Rules set. So we're going to define our rules first. Did I make any rules? Didn't make any rules. So we're going to take a rule. We're going to say, let's say glucose. I don't know. You'll define it with whatever it's going to do. And when you get done with these things, and if you look again here on the last couple of pages, auto release examples on page 21, there are some examples of what people have done with that. These rules are set up, and you can have, if it's a priority rule set, then it would take precedence over any other rule, and sometimes rules can conflict, and so you would set one to say no matter what any other rule does, this rule is in effect. The use of the rule is restricted to, now this is where the client type comes in, and in our location field maintenance we also have location type, or if you leave them blank then there is no restriction. So let's just add a step. Then we're going to check any test, or we're going to check a specific test. And for this rule, we're going to say glucose, or whatever the glucose is. I used to know that. Well, we're going to pick a test that I know a number. All right, and we're going to say if the numeric result is, let's just say a numeric result is, wait a minute. Oh. Huh. Is greater than 600. All right, so that's the conditions. We can have a number of other conditions. We can say if the we can add another rule that says if the age in years is greater than 50, and this looks familiar maybe to some of the others. So for this rule set to take place, we need to have a cholesterol that's over 600. We need to have an age over 50. And we can add a number of other things into this, other considerations. But remember, this is an and statement. So if it's an or statement, you'd need to make separate rules. So now, if we can designate results for repeat, which simply means that you can put the sample back on the instrument and it would have re-downloaded. It doesn't mean that it's automatically going to go tell the instrument to repeat that result. And so what we're going to do is, okay, so now if this rule is satisfied, if the results are over 600 and if their age is greater than 50, then we're going to edit. We want to edit those. So we're going to say all results. But we can also say we want to edit normal results, or we only want to edit abnormal results, or we want results of the rule. So there are a number of different considerations that we can use in here. So in this case, we're going to do that. So now we may have a number of other rules that we want to have in place to say, and what we want to think about are those rules, or those tests that we want to release. If we create a rules set, anything that isn't involved with the rule is going to go to editing. So we want to define what is it that's going to get released. So the default is to edit, and then we're going to release. So once we get all of the rules that we want, then we're going to go up to the test group rule set. And let's say for the Sysmex 9000, that's the one we're going to set up right now. Of all the rules that we've created, we're going to add the rules. I've only got one rule, so we'll add it. But we may have multiple rules that we want to have applied to this test group. Now, the Sysmex is a hematology instrument, so it could care less about glucose, but this is just an example. But you can say that you could set it up so that anything that's normal, or even like if the white count was a specific number, or in certain client cases, all of those kinds of restrictions. So basically, if you're interested in auto release, then we would work together and come up with a way to do that. This is just basically when we would look at things. We would assign a tech ID for the release results, just like we did before. We would assign a tech ID for the held results, because we can designate certain test results to be held. Hang on a second. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. And then we put all of those in here, and then the number of seconds to accumulate results, 5 seconds in computer time is a very, very, very long period of time. And so, but it's enough time to allow the results to accumulate, and then it runs the rules so that it has all the information it needs in order to process the rules. You can make that time shorter. If you make it much longer, it'll be it can slow down the processing so that the editing will take a little bit longer because it'll have to wait the time for that to happen. You can make it a little shorter, but then you kind of risk the you kind of risk the problem with you might not get all the results into the system in order to process all the rules. So that, but the 5 is what the programmers determined as the place to start. If you look at there are some things for delta checking. You can also see here the QC failures. So that what happens if you say yes to QC failure suspending rule checking, that means the rules aren't going to be checked and everything is going to go to editing if quality control is not within the limits. Now that takes some interesting planning that you have to really work through to make sure that all of these things are in place. That's one of the reasons that if all you want to do is to release the normals, it might be just as easy to use the default format and just say yes, I want to auto release, and I only want to see all the abnormal results in the editor. That might be the easier form. But if your auto release rules are going to get complex and you have a lot of different conditions that you want to employ, then the auto release rules are the way to go. The last pages of this section, like I said, show some auto release rule examples. It shows how a delta check, if it fails delta checking, you're going to throw it into editing automatically. Now remember, this doesn't delete anything. It doesn't cause any problems. It just means that it's going to put it into editing, where you're going to look at it in the editor to determine whether or not you want to release it. So you have to manually release it. The abnormal results, any test range flag equals abnormal. That means any of the abnormals. That's basically what we've got in this default section. Is we're going to look at anything that's abnormal or anything that's critical, anything that's result less than a particular number. We're going to edit it. That gives us a chance to make sure we look at it. What it really does for you, what it really looks for you to do is to have you look at only those samples that really need to look at. If you've got as we know from statistics, 95% of all the results are going to be normal. And if all you had to do was to focus your time on those results that were abnormal, or those results that you deemed you needed to look at to make sure, then you wouldn't have to wade through all of the normals. That was the purpose of the auto results. And the last 2 pages show a very complex example of how these rules are set up and how they work. And so they're saying that there are multiple rules into multiple rule attachments, and that's what it would look like if you wanted to do that. So I think that's about all I have. Are there any questions about this or anything that we've talked about either today or in previous days? Everybody is okay. What I'm going to do before the end of the week is I will send out the invites and the documentation for the next class, but the next class will not be next week, as a reminder. We also had a request for the last class to change that to the 21st of August. It's a little bit early. 21 August is a Thursday. I can't remember who it was, but somebody was not going to be available on 19 August, which I'm not sure if I'm going to be available that day anyway. We can talk about more about that for sure, but kind of put that back in your memory bank to see if that's going to be okay with you guys, and we'll go ahead. So next class, we're going to talk about the report maintenance and interim report rules. There's only 2 programs, but they are quite complex, and they do have a lot of things in there. You are using currently your interim report rules very simply, but I'm going to show you what some of the options are in order for reports to go out automatically. And the report maintenance is a fairly large program that will do that. If we get done with that real quick, I may add some other quick things. There's quite a few programs for the last class, and I might shoot some of those up there too. So we'll talk about that a little bit later and when I get back. So if there are any questions, I am available. Okay, then we'll call the meeting over, and we will if you, again, please send me emails if you have any other questions or comments or anything else that that is pertinent to what we talked about, or even if there's some other areas. I sent out a list of all the programs that we were going to cover over the next, over these 6 sessions, and if I missed one, if there's a program that's not there that you want me to cover, please let me know, and I'll be able to work it in. It looks like these sessions are going a little faster than I had anticipated, so we should be able to add a few things if there's some things that you want to see. All right, thank you. Have a good day. Have a good week.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, shoot, Eva.